Hi and welcome to part 1 on the design a card game tutorial using Godot. So in this part we're going to set up the basic card format. First things first, before you start any project, you want to have a pretty clear idea of what you want to do. So I made a quick mock-up in PowerPoint, and here you get the basic idea of what I want it to look like. I want some sort of basic battle map, slots for cards to go, and cards with this kind of format, where in each card you've got a name, cost, whether it's melee or range, any special text, attack and defense, and how much health it has. Okay, and again, as it goes on, these cards should basically snap into place. In terms of layout, I think it's really important that when you go for your layout of your cards, you make it as clear as you can. The best example I can think of this is how they did it in Slay the Spire. So if we look at that, you can see that when you start a battle in Slay the Spire, your cards draw it really nicely from the draw pile, and also if you notice they're kind of arranged in like a little arc, so it's almost as if you're holding those cards in your hands. And as you can see, as soon as you put your mouse over them, they immediately zoom up and any relevant text isn't highlighted for you. And it's really nice how the cards sort of push aside so that you can see the card that you want. And of course, any card you drag up, it's really obvious when you can play it. It targets really nicely, and it makes it a really easy game to play. So with this game, even if you knew nothing about the rules, if I just handed you the game, you could kind of get started and basically mess around with it, probably die pretty quickly, but at least you'd have somewhere to start off with. So we're going to aim for that kind of layout for our basic project. Won't be quite as flashy. We'll have some of the basic things going by the time we finish this first section, in terms of cards drawn quite nicely and cards zooming in when you hover over them. First things first, before we can do any of that, we need to get our basic card set up. Before we can go into that, I'll explain what we're starting off with here. So basically got a blank thing. The only thing I've imported so far is some assets, some background, some cards, some more background stuff, and a basic font type. All this I'll give a link to in the description. Most important things, I've got my cards split into cards that are units and cards that are events. And thanks to W Tactics for giving me the green light to use some of that artwork for this tutorial. Most important thing to look through right now is this card database. So databases, or this database basically works a way to store all the information about each unit. Going through it really quickly, this enum basically enumerates these things. So if I look at item number 0, that'll be my footman. That's my first, second, third, and so on and so forth. I've then written at the top, just to remind myself how I'm going to store each data. So let's look at unit info for now. Every unit info will say what type it is. So they're going to be units, obviously. Their attack value, their retaliation value, their health, their cost, their name, whether they're melee or ranged, and then any special relevant text, which is written right at the end. One of the really important thing that you may have noticed is that for every single unit, the name here matches to the name of the file down here. That means if I plug in this information, Godot will have everything it needs to import this picture. So instead of doing a lot of the hard work, I just create one basic card template and then Godot will do the rest of the work for you. Okay, so let's get started with that. I am going to create a new scene and I'm going to have the root being a margin container. These are basically just nice little boxes we can use. That's going to get quite a lot. I'm going to call that, we'll say card base, just a base for all the cards. And let us save that. I want to create a new folder. I'm just going to call it cards. I'm going to save it there. Okay, so that's on there if I need it. I'll also attach some script. Use that in a bit. And first things first, I want to make sure my card size is right. I want this margin to represent my entire card. So I go to rectangle, and the rough size for a card is 250 by 350. Oops, sorry. I also want the center, or this little cross here, to be in the center. So I want to pivot my offset. So I'm going to halve both these values to give me 125 and 175. That means if I scale it up, it'll scale it from the middle of the card, which makes a few things a bit easier later on. Next, we need to get our card looking right. So, first things first, I'm going to look at adding all the stuff I need in order to get my card database loaded and get it used. Okay, so up here for my variables, I'm going to have an onReady var, which basically loads up as soon as it can. I'm going to call that my card database. And for that, I just want to preload my card database file, which is down here. So I need to, sorry, there for me. Right at the bottom is my card database. So I'll load up all my cards. I'm also going to say now what card I want. So normally we call from a higher function, just to get things working. I'm going to say the card I want to call, we'll just say it's going to be a footman first. Okay, and then the next thing I need to do is load up that info for just a footman from my card database. So another onReady var, card info. I want to go to my card database. If we look at my card database, we want to look at the data, and then I want to tell it to get that card by the name of footman. So the way I do that is square brackets for an array. We want to go to the card database itself, and we want to get whatever the card name is. So if I just run this now, I'll show that's actually working. So my ready function, I'm just going to print my card info. And if we just really quickly run that, you can see at the bottom here, it's giving the information that I need to say that I've loaded up a footman. Okay, now I'm going to add some nodes. I'm going to add a couple of sprites. So just search for sprites. So, top one is going to be the card itself. Other one is going to be the border around the outside of the card. Important to know with these sprite nodes is it always draws the one at the bottom on top of any ones that are higher up. So the border will be drawn on top of the card. With the border, that's very straightforward. I'm going to drag in the texture card border, and I don't want it centered. Now looking at my card base, these two don't quite match up. So first thing I'm going to do is look at stretching this so that it's going to fit in. Okay, we could do this manually. I could alter the scale until it fits. I'm actually going to do it in code, just in case I change my border later on. I've got the script there all ready to go. So into here, I want to add a var. That is going to be the card size. And for that, we would have it in card base. So I'm just going to call rectangle size. Okay. If you're not sure where it comes from, if you look in card base in the inspector, size over here, if you hover over it, it tells you it is called rec size. Okay. So this will be the card size. That'll give us the vector of how big it is. All I need to do now is just scale it up. So I'm going to get my node border, and I'm going to change the scale. And I'm going to times it by, so times equal means times itself by, I'm going to times it by the card size I want it to be, I'm going to divide it by the current size. So I'm going to times it by card size, and I'm going to divide it by the current size of this texture here. It depends what texture this is, so I've got to call this texture file here. So I need to divide it by, get my border node, call the texture, and I think it's just texture size, texture get size. And if I run that, that should automatically scale up my border until it's the right size. I'll run it anyway, but it might be hard to see. Yeah, I think it's working, although it's kind of hard to tell. We are now going to load up the card image. So, if you've noticed, I included what unit this was, and I called it units rather than unit. The reason for that was I wanted to match my folder name. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to load up the image of that card. So in order to do that, I'm going to have another onReady var, and that is basically going to contain the info for my card image location. We'll call it card image for now. I might change later on. All I'm going to do that is I'm going to write the path of where it is, and that's going to be a string. So let's look where it's going to be. Starts off in my directory. Next, it is in my assets folder. Next, it is in cards. Now here I've got an option. It can either be events or units, and I want to tell it to call it based upon what this card info is. So if I look here, the first thing in my card info told me it was units. So the way strings work, you can just string, no pun intended, a bunch of stuff together, and it will all basically join it together. Let's see what's next in the path. After that, I will want a backslash. So let's put that in my string. And then after that, I want to call its name. And its name here is Footman. That is just going to be the card name itself. So the way my code works is the name here isn't always the same as the name here. Because when I've stored them as pictures, I've often just kept them as one single word. And lastly, we just need to finish that off. And you notice that all my files are .png, so it kind of helps if you've got a uniform file storing system. So last, I'm going to add .png together. So it looks like a bit of a mess, basically going to join all that stuff together. We can check it's working if I just run it and print it again. So it's a nice way to test using the print function. And yeah, looking down here, we've got the perfect directory name to call that Footman image. So now we can load that image as a picture. Probably best on the ready function. Okay, so I'm going to say that if I call my card function, and pictures and sprites are always called textures, for that all I wanted to do is load up my card image. That'll then load the card image and put it in there. If you run this now, it'll probably look horrendous because I haven't done my sizing yet. Yep. What we can do, we actually want to scale it the exact same way I scaled my border. So card scale is going to be this, and I want to divide it by the card size. Now if you run that now, it's still not working, and that's because I have not offset it, or have offset it. So cancel offset, and then that'll be running fine. So now if we change the images, that bit of code will automatically make both the border and the card look in the same size. Next thing we need to do, if I go back to my sort of PowerPoint really rubbish template, we want to add in all this information here. And that's what I'm going to do now. If I just look at the arch, that's a bit clearer. You can kind of see it's neatly divided into bars. So basically you've got this top bar, which has its name and its cost, then a gap, then another bar containing this information down here, and then a final bar containing this information here. We can use that same thing in Godot. So up to my card base, I'm going to add a child, and that is going to be vertical bars, or bbox container. There we go. I'll just call that bars, just so it's a bit shorter to type in later on. First things first, I want to add a little gap at the top. So I need to add another margin container. And I'm going to go to the rectangle, min size, and I'm going to say for now, let's have a 25 gap. So that gap will always be left completely blank. I'm going to call that top gap, just so it's really obvious to me what's going on. Next, underneath this top gap, I want to add some horizontal bars so I can fit the name and also the cost over here. So go back to my bars, add a child, and it's going to be a H box. So this basically stands for horizontal bars in a row. We can just call that the top bar if we want. First things first, I need to add a margin container just because I don't want it to start right at this point here. I want to leave a little gap. So rectangle, min size, we'll call it 25 again. That means I can only start drawing from this point onwards. We'll just call that left gap again, keeping things really clear what I'm doing. Back to top bar. Now we're going to add the first name. So this is another margin container. A lot of margin containers here. That is going to be the name. I want my name to have a background behind it. So I'm going to add a child node, and that is going to be a 9-patch rectangle. Okay, this is basically a scalable texture. I'm going to chuck a background shader into that texture. So I'll automatically draw that no matter how big it is. Next, in my name, I need to add some more stuff to actually give it a size. I'm now going to add a center container, which I think will work. And to that, I'm going to add a label. So label my basic text. And if I call this footman, yeah, you can see that our 9-patch rect has drawn behind that. So a little border to it. However, that text is really small. Changing the font you always have to do, and it's a bit of a pest. Custom fonts, new dynamic fonts. To that, you then do something weird with it. There we go. You go down to font, font data, new font data. Nope, load font data. Go into my assets, font, this font here. Okay, so now it's a bit bigger. I can make it smaller if I need to. So I'll make that a tiny bit smaller. Also, looking at that, this rectangle is really strict onto it. So I might at some point want to add a few more margins to this, but I'll leave it like that for now. Just not going too long on this. And that is his name. The advantage of doing it this way is that if I then import an archer, I can just change the name to archer and do it all automatically, rather than me have to go through all these steps again. I want the cost over here. So I need to add, so you can guess it, another margin container. This will be my mid gap. I'm going to let this be as big as it wants to be in order to fill any empty space. So I think if you go down to size flags, you want horizontally, you want it to expand. You want it to be as big as it can be. And remember, the card base goes up to here. We made it stretching this border up here. So that's my middle gap. Now I want to squeeze the cost over here, and then another little gap over here so it's not being pushed right to the right. So I now want to add the cost. Look, that's not too bad because that's basically the exact same thing we did for the name. So if we just duplicate this, we have name 2. This is going to be the cost. Shrink that down, put it below middle gap, and I want it to have a cost of 1. So if I go to my label, 1, I'll change that from name to cost. Okay, again, that's right to the right hand side, which we don't want. So just like we had a left gap, we want a right hand side gap again. So back to my top bar, last margin container, and this is going to be my right gap. And I want that to have a minimum size. So rect, I think my min size has always been 25, so I'll stick with that for now. So if I run that now, you can see it's now got the text and the cost right now. We might sort out sizes and font sizes and any sort of transparency to these things in a bit. Right now we'll keep that. So that's my top bar done. After the top bar, we then had a gap. So we add, of course we do, a margin container. We'll call it the mid gap. And in rects, nope, in size flags, we want it to be as big as it wants to be. So vertical, we want it to expand. So that'll take all the space it wants to. Now we want to fit in the sort of text that goes in the middle. I'll try and copy all of this, put it underneath my middle gap. And this will be special text. So I'll basically say whether it's media arranged or anything else special about it. I can delete all the costs, so nothing over there. I can also delete the right gap because the middle gap will take care of it for me. And in this case, instead of name, we'll call it stamped. No, we'll call it type. And the footman's type is melee because he's hand to hand and not ranged. So we're getting there. We're pretty much done. All we need to do, I think I want another gap there. I'm basically going to have sort of a smaller gap underneath it. That's going to be a fixed size. So we had another margin container. I'll call it lower gap. And I'm going to say I always want to have a gap of at least, we'll say 40 this time on the Y. So it's pushing melee up. And now underneath that, last one to do, we just have top bar. We now want to duplicate that. Shrink that down, drag it to the bottom. that is going to be the bottom bar. So in here we're going to call the, let's go back to our PowerPoint, attack, retaliation, and health. So here, instead of name, we have attack and retaliation. I'll just call it attack. I'll call this A and R for attack and retaliation, and the footman is one of each. Cost, not the cost, that is the health. Health, and the footman's health is 2. And lastly, if I run that, that doesn't quite look right because this stuff here is right at the bottom. So just so we had a little lower gap here, I want another gap underneath it. So duplicate it, stick it right at the end, and we'll call that bottom gap. Okay, don't want it quite as big, we'll just have a min size of 30. Again, we can always tweak this later on if we need to. And let's see how that's looking. So yeah, that'll do. I think my text is a bit small in a couple of spaces. I might push this up later. But for the rough idea, that should be everything we need to do. I'm just going to do one more thing. So if I go back to my base and I say rather than a footman, it is an archer, and I rerun it. So for the only thing that's changing is the image. All this text is staying the same, which we don't really want. We want it to be able to update all that text for us. And we're going to do all of that in this ready function. So let's just remind ourselves what card info we get. So run it again, tell it to print the card info. And this is my archer. What you want to do now is import all the important information, attack, defense, cost, etc. into these bars already drawn that are currently just filled with the footman stuff right now. We do that all in the ready function. So let's get a list of vares where everything is. So if I go back to my card database and see what everything was, what it was. So first 2 are attack and retaliation. That's my 2 and my 1. So there. Attack is going to be card info 1. Okay. And also I need that as a string. So I'm going to call that a string of card info 1. Just so it displays as a text rather than just a number, the number 2, sorry, in this case. Same thing for my retaliation. That's number 2. This 3 refers to its health. Four here refers to the cost. And lastly, 5 is basically, so 5 it says archer. So right, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's right. And 6 is ranged and immune to retaliation. Those things combined together. That's what I call special text, so let's call it best. Special text. And that is going to be 6. We don't need to call the name again, because that's already called right at the start, so I'm basically ignoring that one. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into these bars and we're going to set everything up according to what it is. So what we need to do is we need to deep dive down these node paths to work out what I want. So first things first, I'm going to get the name sorted out. Okay, and that name is already written up here, card name. So get node. Bars, I want to go to my top bar. I then want my name, center container dot name. That won't quite do it. If I go into that, you'll see that all the label stuff is stored under text. So back in my code, I need a .text. That was my card name. And I'm just going to do this another, I think it's 4 times. 2, 3, 4. So next, I've done the name. I need to get the cost. That was the exact same, except cost is written twice. Cost is cost. And at least we're just left with attack and retaliation. So this one's slightly awkward because it is 2 things combined together. We can handle that absolutely fine just by using the string function we used earlier to get this card image working. So that text is going to equal string of, first I want the attack, comma, I then just want a slash key, and I'm doing this wrong because that attack should not be in hyphens, it's already a string, but this dash should be. And retaliation. So that should be it. And I think it's upset because I can't have A and R as an expression. Let's just write A and R and see if that sorts it out. Yep, that seems happy. Let's run that and see if that's working. So now it's giving me all my archer information. And it does. So it's called an archer, cost 2, it's ranged, immune to retaliation, attack 2, retaliation 1, and has health of 3. And now that'll work for whatever card name we go in here. So let's do one more example. Let's throw the mentor in, see if that's working alright. Yeah, so mentor, cost 2. There's the text. Possibly sort out that at some point. We'll do that for now. And then it's attack, defense, and health. So we'll leave it there for part 1. Get the basic card up and running. And next in part 2, we'll start our overall play space where we can sort of call these cards into my play space and have an actual hand of cards. Okay, so I'll see you then.